Hello everyone, this is the first video in a series dedicated to explaining how the Wittgenstein Archives website really works. If you're interested in Wittgenstein and want to understand how new technologies can help us better understand his thought, then you're in the right place. In particular, in this video we will focus on one very specific case, Wittgenstein's self-translation in English of the first version of the first part of what we now call philosophical investigations. But why is this so-called self-translation so important? Well, because sometimes this self-translation is not a self-translation at all, but is rather a new configuration of thought. So, this self-translation is a really important place in which we can vividly see how Wittgenstein's thought gradually evolves, and we can visualize this evolution through the Wittgenstein Archives website. But first, a little bit of background. I need some of your attention now because it's a bit of an intricate story, but I assure you that if Wittgenstein's philosophy interests you, it might be worth it. By the beginning of November 1936, when Wittgenstein was residing at his house in Norway in Schulte, he had dismissed the Brown Book project in its entirety. Then, in 1936-37, he wrote the first compact version of what we today know as Philosophical Investigations between paragraph 1 and paragraph 188. This text is today called the Urfassung, namely the early version of the Philosophical Investigation. The Urfassung is preserved in the Nachlass as manuscript 142. TypeScript with a clean version of manuscript 142, TypeScript 220, was begun and probably also completed in the summer of 1937. A later version of TypeScript 220, TypeScript 239, formed the basis of an English translation draft conducted by Rush Rees, one of Wittgenstein's closest students and friends, in 1939. This English translation, which actually corresponds to paragraphs 1 to 108 of Philosophical Investigation, so a first part of the first version of the first part of what we today call Philosophical Investigations, is TypeScript 226. But now the question is, why is this TypeScript so interesting? Well, the interesting thing is that the entire TypeScript contains numerous revisions in Wittgenstein's hand. These revisions are all corrections to Rees' translation draft. Apparently, Wittgenstein was not very happy with Rees' translation. Let's see what he says to Moore about that. Dear Moore, I had a PC on Wednesday from Keynes saying that he would like to see the English version of my book, or whatever is ready of it. I didn't say the whole thing is absurd, as he couldn't even make head or tail of it if it weren't translated very well, but as a matter of fact, the translation is pretty awful, as I saw today when I tried to go through it in order to correct it before giving it to Keynes. Though I worked quite hard on it a whole day with Smithies, we only did 12 pages, because masses of it had to be altered. By the way, please don't mention to anyone that I don't think highly of the translation. Rees did his very best, and the stuff is damn difficult to translate. I hope to see you soon. Best wishes, yours, Ludwig Wittgenstein. This being the case, Wittgenstein should simply correct Rees' misleading translation. But if we carefully look at the revisions by Wittgenstein, we notice that many of Wittgenstein's revisions in TypeScript 226 may be regarded as revisions to the German source text itself and to introduce new meanings as much as corrections to the translation. This means that Wittgenstein was, at least partly, clearly not only correcting Rees' translation, but also used it as a basis for developing the Philosophical Investigations text and projects itself further. Actually, these revisions didn't affect the final version of Philosophical Investigations because Wittgenstein was used to disregard the work text. He was used to go back to the earlier versions of his philosophical reasoning. Nevertheless, these revisions or replacements are absolutely important, especially if one wants to understand the philosophical evolution of Wittgenstein, because, in a sense, we could say that here Wittgenstein was developing or rephrasing its own thought. If we look closely at these revisions, we can see Wittgenstein's thinking activity at work. We can see a big portion of his Gedankenbewegungen, of his movements of thought. But now the question is, how can we properly see these movements of thought? And this is exactly where the Wittgenstein Archives website comes in. So, what we need to do? First, search for wab.uib.no on Google, then go to Wittgenstein Online, then go to Wittgenstein IDP. Here you have the Nachlass in interactive dynamic presentation. Basically, you have free access to the transcriptions of all Wittgenstein's Nachlass, individually or by groups. After that, scroll down in the list of items of the Nachlass and go to TS 239. Go to click here to change default options and make sure that the option show original line breaks is activated. Finally, just click Go. That way, we produce a linear and slightly normalized version of the document. Then we choose the portion of text in which we're interested. I'm using a simple Google Chrome research function here, and we copy that portion in a Microsoft Word document. What I have here now is a reader-friendly version of the text. Orthography is gently normalized, deficiencies due to typewriter limitations are tacitly corrected, deleted text is omitted, undecided alternatives are still retained and marked, and so on. Let's put the name Wittgenstein Urfassung for this file. Okay, so far so good. Suppose we now want to compare this passage from the Urfassung with Rees's translation. All we need to do is this. Just go to the Wittgenstein ADP page again, scroll down in the list of items of the Nachlass and go to TS 226. Go to click here to change default options, and once again, make sure that the option Show Original Line Breaks is activated. This time, however, we need to activate additionally the option Exclude and Return Revisions in TypeScript. And click Go again. In that way, we produce a text without Wittgenstein's corrections and revisions. At this point, we can go to the translated part of the text that interests us, select it, copy it, paste it into another document in Microsoft Word. We open a new Microsoft Word file and paste the passage here, and here we are. We now have 2 pages which allow the reader to easily read the German source and Rees's English translation in parallel and without being distracted by the numerous additions by Wittgenstein's hand. Let's put the name Rees translation for this file. Suppose now we want to compare this passage translated by Rees with Wittgenstein's corrections. All we need to do is this. First, go back to the Wittgenstein ADP page, scroll down the list of Nachlass entries, and go to TS 226. Go to click here to change default options, and once again, make sure that the option Show Original Line Breaks is activated. This time, however, let's uncheck Exclude and Return Revisions in TypeScript, because we want the revisions to be there. And here we go again. We now have a version of TypeScript 226, namely Rees's translation of the Urfassung, but with the addition of Wittgenstein's corrections. But how do we get a more accurate visualization of Wittgenstein's self-translation? Well, we can use a very simple function. We can use Microsoft Word's Compare Two Documents function. First and once more, we copy and paste the relevant part into Microsoft Word. This time, we save the file with the name Wittgenstein Self-Translation. We now open a new Microsoft Word file, go to Review, then go to Track Changes, go to Markup Options, and then to Preferences. Then we go to Insertions and select Color Only and Bright Green or whatever color you want, and go to Deletions and select Strike Through and Pink, and finally we go to Formatting and select Strike Through and Pink again. At this point, we stay on Review, go to Compare, then Compare Documents, we select Rees translation and then select Wittgenstein's corrections, and here we go. Now we have a new document in which we can very easily visualize Wittgenstein's attempt at self-translation, and we can also discover some very interesting things. For example, in this particular case, we can discover that, according to Wittgenstein, the correct translation of the key notion of Familienähnlichkeiten is neither family similarities as proposed by Rees, nor family resemblances, the translation by which it is known throughout the world, but family likenesses. Just a quick note. In addition, you can compare documents directly using the website. Go to Wittgenstein Online again, this time click on Wittgenstein's source. Through a simple keyword search, you can get to view the same remark in different typescripts, TS220, TS239, and finally TS 226. Of course, this is only one single example of the interesting discoveries we can make through this method, given that paradoxically, Rees translation is much more literal than Wittgenstein's. Wittgenstein is, as it were, correcting himself rather than correcting a faulty translation. But most importantly, this is just one single example of the uses we can make of the Wittgenstein Archives website to consolidate our knowledge of Wittgenstein's text and to develop new interpretations increasingly guided by textual data. Thank you all for your attention. It's a short list of references and you can find it again in the description below. That's all then, see you in the next video. Ciao!